I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. The wait is over. It's finally here. After decades of making people across the country laugh,
I was trying to write the word eulogy the other day, and my phone just kept going like, we haven't found any substitutes. Spell check was a picture of a guy with his pockets pulled out going, I don't know.
And building a podcast empire.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. No choice but to get on, mandate, get it on.
Adam Carolla has produced his very first stand-up special. In association with Chassis Media and Tug.com, Fascination Street Podcast presents Adam Carolla's Not Taco Bell Material.
No one in my family knew what I was doing. They didn't have basic cable. Bad sign financially when you can't afford something that starts with the word basic.
Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. In San Antonio, Texas. Tickets are $12, and you must buy your ticket in advance. We have to meet the pre-sale ticket threshold by March 12th, a week before the event. You can still buy tickets after March 12th, but we have to hit that threshold by March 12th for this event to take place on March 20th. I'm hosting. There will be giveaways of t-shirts, goodie bags, autographed books. All you got to do is show up and be ready to laugh. For ticket information, go to FascinationStreetPod.com. Click on that portrait of Adam Carolla, and it'll take you straight to the place where you buy tickets. It's going to be fun. I'll see you there. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with attorney Ben Meiselas. Ben is an attorney with the law firm of Geragos and Geragos and is very prominent in the legal community and is currently handling some of the biggest cases in the current zeitgeist. In this episode, we talk about why Ben decided to become an attorney. We talk about the time he spent working with and for Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, Representative Steve Israel, Sean P. Diddy Combs, and how he got involved with Mark Geragos and the Geragos and Geragos law firm. We also cover a few of his more notable cases, such as the Colin Kaepernick versus the NFL case, his class action lawsuit against CenturyLink, as well as his involvement in the class action lawsuit against the Fyre Festival, his involvement with the Jussie Smollett case, and finally, he tells us what is the Big Three basketball league and how he's involved with it. So enjoy, folks. This is my interview with super attorney Ben Meiselas.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Ben Meiselas. Am I saying your name right, Ben?
You're saying it right, Meiselas.
Fantastic. Well, Ben, I know that we have had several missed opportunities, so let's stuff this turkey. What do you say?
I like that. That's my line.
I know. Okay, so tell me where you grew up and what kind of got you into the law practice.
So I grew up in Long Island, New York, in a small town called Plainview. And the town is, as it sounds, a very plain town. Attended JFK High School there. I early on had gotten involved in student government and, always loved helping out and being an advocate for the other students and friends and really bringing people together. So, as far as I can remember, whether it was elementary school, whether it was middle school or high school, I'd always been the president of student government in those respective areas. I went to George Washington University undergrad. I had interesting professional experiences where I interned for P. Diddy. I had interned and worked for Congressman Steve Israel, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and then just seeing generally the career paths that others who were older than me were taking. And I saw that a lot of them were going to law school and making that decision in their late 20s, early 30s. when I was, in my early 20s at that time, I thought the people who I looked up to were going to law school. I love public speaking. I love writing. I love being an advocate. So I decided to go to law school. I didn't fully know at that time what specific area of law I wanted to get into until I met Mark Geragos, where I currently work.
Okay, so you interned for Diddy and Hillary. I mean, at separate times, obviously. Is that right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, separate times, but there is a link there, which is that if you recall back in 2004 during the presidential elections, Bush versus Kerry, T. Diddy had a nonprofit called Citizen Change, which had a campaign called Vote or Die, with those Vote or Die T-shirts that everyone was wearing in 2004. So I ran the events for Vote or Die, and that introduced me to politics. And so I wanted to then get into politics, and I pivoted from entertainment to politics in my early 20s. And then Congressman Steve Israel at that time was from the 2nd District of New York, and I had interned there for 2 semesters in college. And then the people there recommended that because of the work I was doing for Congressman Israel, that I would be a good fit for Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. And the way it really works is setting aside whether your political views are, although generally they align with the people who you end up working for, you work for the area that you live in. So I grew up in Long Island. The 2nd District was my district. That's how I met Congressman Steve Israel. And then at that time, Hillary Rodham Clinton was a New York senator. So that's how I made that introduction to Senator Clinton.
Gotcha. That sounds really exciting. Were you super, super excited when all of that was going on? I mean, you were pretty young and fresh out of school. Was that like overwhelmingly exciting for you?
Yeah, and a lot of it I was still in undergrad when I was doing that, so I was in my early 20s. We're talking about that time, 2005, 2006, 2007, right around that time, although some of the years all meld together. But, it was really starting from the bottom. My day-to-day tasks for Hillary Rodham Clinton would be sometimes getting flowers in the morning for the office to responding to constituent mail. But my favorite part of both the congressman's office and Hillary Rodham Clinton's Senate office was I always loved giving the tours of the Capitol building, which is a constituent service. So if the constituents show up, they can ask for a tour of the Capitol, and usually that falls on, the interns and the clerks to do, which usually isn't a task that people volunteer for. But for me, I love doing it. I found that task was a way to really, change somebody's view of the government and just change their trip and make it a very positive experience. A lot of times when the constituents show up, they never get to meet the senator or the congressman, or if they're lucky, they do on a rare occasion, but usually they're not in. So you're the only contact that a constituent has, regardless of whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent. Their only view of that Senate office or Congress office is you as the intern. And so, it's important to be a good representation of just decency and the values of the office, and projecting, a positive image of the government generally and of the Capitol building and its history. And so, I still remember some of the facts about that building and the crypt and the rotunda and the apotheosis of George Washington. I would love giving those tours, though, and it was a very fascinating building.
Did you say the crypt?
Yeah, there's the 2nd floor. They call it the crypt area. And there's always this history surrounding each of the different floors, but they claim that one of them, the crypt area, was used during the Civil War to rehabilitate injured soldiers. And then you have the apotheosis of George Washington, which is the painting on the top of the main Capitol rotunda. But, you generally, one of the things that fascinated me about the building is you never know who is going to be in the Capitol building. So you could be just walking and giving a tour. And then I think at that time it was Prime Minister Karzai from Afghanistan would be walking through. And that was when Dick Cheney and Bush were president and vice president. And so they would sometimes be walking through on a vote. And so it's a living museum. And I love sharing that experience with everyone. And it gave me I think a very inspiring look at good lawyers who, many of whom became politicians from both political parties. And that's when I, made the decision that I was going to go to law school. So about the age of it was 2006, 7, I made the decision to go to law school. I was probably 21, 22 years old at the time. I went to Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C., had some incredible professors there. One of the best parts about Georgetown Law School is how immersed it is in the community. And so, from top circuit court judges or district court judges and some of the top lawyers teach classes. So you get not just a regular curriculum of criminal law and constitutional law and negligence and tort law and all this stuff, but you get this added experience of getting to be around really, really, really good lawyers who are at the top of their field. And then my second year of law school, Mark Geragos, who I work with, was trying a bunch of cases in Washington, D.C., white-collar cases out there with some D.C. lawyers. And that summer, I worked with him, loved it so much that I continued working in that D.C. office for the remainder of law school. And then, even though it wasn't my initial plan that I was going to be living and practicing law in California, I always thought I was going to be in either New York or Washington, D.C. I really enjoyed my experience working for Mark Geragos so much that I decided to move out to California, take the bar exam in California, be a California lawyer. So, pretty much overnight, I packed up all my stuff, which wasn't that much at the time, moved out to California and started living with, 5 or 6 roommates and, began a career of 18-hour, 20-hour days, really perfecting the craft of being a lawyer. And what most inspired me about working for Mark is that I got to try cases, right away, which is rare for new lawyers, or any lawyers. A lot of civil lawyers never get to try any cases in their career. Certainly young lawyers, if you work at one of these large big firms, you just review documents all day, and it's not really practicing law. But, Mark threw you in right away with a sink or swim mentality, as his father did when his father trained him. And through that, I gained a ton of experience. I got to take depositions right away. My first year of being a lawyer, I was taking, 5 to 10 depositions a month. I was doing trials every other month. And so it was just, an incredible experience of actually practicing the law as it was meant to be.
So no kiddie pool for you. Mark just threw you into the deep end right away.
Yeah, it was sink or swim. I recall one story in particular where, as I was waiting for my bar results, I had sent a demand letter in a fairly complex case to the opposing counsel, which led to a mediation. Mediation, for your listeners that they don't know, is usually you're in a separate room with your client and the other side is in a separate room with their client, and a retired judge or a prestigious lawyer who mediates for a living tries to bring the sides together to reach a resolution or settlement. So we were in this mediation based on a demand letter that, that I had written. And under no circumstance did I think that, having literally just started with Mark, I think it was my second or third week on the job, that I would be giving an opening statement, in a room full of other lawyers. And had I known that I would have been doing that, I probably would have, at least prepared the speech before. Although I obviously knew the case because I wrote the letter, although there were so much complexities with it. But Mark acted like he was going to give it, when the mediator said, you can give your opening statement. And then I still recall it as though it happened yesterday. Mark said, Ben's going to give the opening statement. And I remember there was about 2 seconds where my heart was beating and pounding faster than I think it ever had in my life. And there was a fight or flight kind of instinct of, how am I supposed to fill 15 to 20 minutes to talk about this highly unusual and complex case when I have no notes in a room full of other lawyers and, real people's lives are on the line. So I took a deep breath and resisted the instinct to run back to Plainview and delivered a decent opening. But it was probably the most significant experience looking back, because after that, I was never afraid. And 2, I always knew that I needed to be prepared to give an opening statement or be ready to think on my feet. And it's a testament and a credit to Mark's training, which is truly like the Navy SEALs of lawyer training.
So I feel like maybe running those events for Hillary and Diddy back then maybe prepared you for, speaking in front of large groups of people and sort of handling spur of the moment changes and things that didn't quite go right. And like you said, thinking on your feet. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Oh, I absolutely do. And one of the things when I teach, middle school students, high school students, elementary school students, and older, is they need to be exposed to a lot of these real world things like the congressman experience, like the Hillary Rodham Clinton experiences, because it just shows you that we're all human, we're all people. There's no secret world going on. It's based on, human interaction, human decision making, and you don't have to just be kind of a victim of circumstance. And so working with Clinton and Diddy's and all these people showed me that there's a methodology of communication that's successful. There's a methodology of communication which works and which doesn't work. And pivoting that into the field of law is right on point, which is you need to be creative. You need to be able to organize. You need to be able to speak clearly and competently. And, significantly, you need to be able to instill confidence in people. When young lawyers who I train now, or lawyers in the community, just in court, I always think to myself, if that lawyer was a pilot, would I ever want that lawyer to be my pilot of my flight when I'm flying from LA to New York? And usually the answer is no way. I don't want the pilot to start maybe we should do this, and maybe we should do that. That's not what a client is looking for, right? A client is looking for clear guidance, clear direction, and clear decision making. You as the lawyer are playing one of the most complex games of human chess. You have to deliver positive results for your client. It's called a practice, not a science of law, because there isn't a mathematical formula that spits out the answer. Y versus X doesn't necessarily equal, an outcome that's predictable. But what you can gather is based on all of the data that you have assembled, based on your experience, based on your reading and your studies, what the most likely and probable outcomes are. And our key phrase at the office is fluidity, which is, you have to be able to adapt on a moment's notice. And if your plan was one plan, you may get new data or new information that completely changes your plan right away. And if you're so focused on what the plan was yesterday and you're not going to veer from that plan, you're going to get crushed in the field of law.
Wow. Well, that makes total sense. So let's move on to some specific cases that you have been involved in. And this is with the understanding that I know there's going to be a lot that you can't say. So do as you will, protecting yourself and your client, of course, but let's just go from there. So I think the first time that we got rescheduled, you had an all of a sudden emergency appointment thing. And then an hour later, I saw all over the internet that the Kaepernick versus the NFL suit settled. So I'm going to assume that's why that we had to reschedule that first time. What can you tell me about that case?
Well, I would say this. Practicing the type of law that I practice, though, one of the most exciting parts, but also the frustrating parts, is that that's not an uncommon day, regardless of this case or that case. Since you and I have been on the call, I probably have gotten, while I've been doing this podcast on my phone, about 35 calls, and I keep looking at them. And the reality is that's what makes these days so incredibly exciting. I grew up and I used to play video games, but my real life, I feel, is way more exciting, and I'm really helping people than any game that could be made out there. I get to every day affect change in the biggest and broadest sense at both the micro and the macro level. And with Colin Kaepernick, that really was an extension of a lot of the work that I was doing in communities to help victims of police brutality and victims of excessive force. I worked very closely in small towns and big cities, from Bakersfield and Fresno to Los Angeles to Chicago to Mesa, Arizona, and Phoenix and Nevada, San Francisco. Really, I shouldn't say there's not a city that I haven't had, a case involving police brutality or excessive force, but there's very few. I mean, I've done these cases all over the country, and it was through that relationship that I met Mr. Kaepernick, and, it was an unbelievable, very inspiring experience to work with him, to be his lawyer, to be his friend, and, to lead many positive initiatives. And when the history is told about this era that we live in, Mr. Kaepernick will be remembered as being what America is really all about. standing up for ideals and values that are so significant that they find themselves at the list of number one on the amendments, which is, our freedom of speech. And that's a right that we all hold dear, a right that he has, a right that he fought for, and a right that he'll continue to fight for. And so, I look forward to continue working with Mr. Kaepernick, with others, to forward their mission for bringing attention to racial disparities, inequality, police brutality, bridging understandings amongst communities to ultimately empower them so that we're living in a better vision of what America could be. But we know that Mr. Kaepernick would like to play again at the highest level in the NFL. I've seen him. He's certainly in the best shape of his life. He looks incredible, works out every morning super early, the most intense workouts, that I'm aware of. We'll see what happens.
So I'm not going to waste either one of our time by asking you about any specific dollar amount because that's ridiculous. But what I will ask is, you said that he is looking forward to playing or would like to play. So there was nothing in that settlement agreement that would preclude him from seeking employment in the NFL going forward?
So I can't give any statements whatsoever about the agreement in any kind other than to tell you that he's definitely interested in returning to the playing field and is in the best shape of his life.
Gotcha. Moving on. Now, that's not your only big giant case. You're also heavily involved in the Fyre Festival lawsuits. Can you tell us how you got involved with that or a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. So the Fyre Festival lawsuits are an extension of the work that I do as a class action attorney. Not just that case, but I lead a lot of other nationwide class actions. Most notably, there's a case against CenturyLink, which is a $1 billion class action. Our allegations of overcharging, double billing, phantom charges, which spread to, I think CenturyLink is in about 30 states, and we represent a class in almost every state that are currently merged or consolidated in Minnesota. And so there's that class action going on there. And we've led a number of data breach class actions, a number of other consumer class actions across the country. And so we tend to get a lot of phone calls when something like a Fyre Festival, situation breaks. We'll probably get 1,000 to 2,000 inquiries every day in our inbox, just generally speaking. And some are very intriguing. Some are, absolutely, horrifying that things like this are going on where we want to help right away. There are some messages that are incredibly crazy. There are some that seem incredibly crazy, but are true. That's why you have to vet them all. And so that particular weekend in April of 2017, we started getting inquiries from people who generally, if you look up class action lawyer or if you've seen, Mark on CNN or TV or me doing an appearance somewhere, people will generally know to reach out to us, or we're one of their first calls. And so they reached out and told us they were trapped on an island in the Bahamas and for a festival. And it's kind of hard to digest it all at first and make sense of what the heck they were talking about, and I think for the first few hours I kept on calling it the Fyre Festival, not even Fyre, but it doesn't really matter because Fyre is just as made up as fry. It's made up words. So I remember Mark and I were speaking at a convention in Vegas for, I forget if it was either Mass Torts or one of these major legal conventions that happen biannually or every few months. And we got these calls. And I remember drafting the lawsuit with someone at my office literally that Saturday as it was still going on. And we filed the lawsuit on a Sunday. People arrived, I think, on either Thursday or Friday. By Saturday, we had the lawsuit filed, which is how nimble and ready we were to go. I filed the lawsuit, and instantly the lawsuit kind of, I think, really put gasoline on an already huge fire, pun intended. And one of the things that we kind of pivoted to right away was that this wasn't just like a festival gone wrong. It wasn't just like an idiot who couldn't put on a show, that there was real criminal machinations at play. And so we made sure to emphasize that this was criminal conduct as well. And that led to ultimately an FBI investigation, which exposed this normally when I would get asked questions about Fyre, I'd have to explain what it is. But I think over 120 million people have watched it between Hulu and Netflix, and I think your listeners probably know what Fyre is. But this festival that was supposed to take place in the Bahamas, but in the reality it was not a festival, and there was nothing there, and there were no bands, there were no accommodations, and literally people just showed up and didn't know what to do, and then they were stuck there. So a lot of the work that we do on many of our cases, we shed light on these issues, ultimately lead to larger investigations. In this case, obviously, the FBI investigation, the guy who conceived of this fraud or fraudulently conceived of Fyre is now serving significant sentence for a crime like this, which is about 5 to 6 years, although perhaps he should have done more time. But he's currently serving prison time now. And about a year ago, maybe a little later, but I think around a year ago, I was contacted by Netflix and Hulu, who were doing these documentaries on the festival. And they both sat down with me for about, 12, 15 hours, each. And, after doing the interviews, I kind of forgot about both of them, that I did the interviews even. And then all of a sudden, one showed up on Hulu and I start getting 100 text messages per minute. All of a sudden, this became like the most watched movie of 2019 so far. And then I was in both of them, which made it kind of extra compounded. It just became kind of funny. I enjoy my work on the Fyre case. I think that the work that I do there is helpful generally in terms of bringing accountability to con artists. But I think there are other cases that I do that perhaps have a broader societal impact. But when I'm in the gym or when I'm walking down the street, people will stop me and say, are you the guy who played the guy in Fyre? And I go, no, I'm the guy from it. I wasn't acting. That's me. So, or when I'm in the elevator, someone will stare and go, weren't you in that movie? And I go, yeah. It's usually the first thing that someone will say if they haven't talked to me in a while, or that they're just connecting. And so that's my Fyre Festival notoriety for you.
As a side note, do you get paid for being in a documentary? I mean, is it like being in a regular film?
No.
Sweet. How awesome.
Yeah, no, you don't get paid. I mean, I guess arguably you could figure out a way to get paid, but I wasn't paid for.
Gotcha.
I wasn't paid for either, and I wouldn't want to be if I'm giving, a raw and adulterated analysis,
right,
of it.
So you said that you guys were getting calls, I guess, like the event started on Saturday or was supposed to start on Saturday, and you guys were getting calls it was supposed to start on Thursday, and you guys were getting calls like on Friday and Saturday?
Yeah, I forget if it started Thursday night, if they flew in Thursday or if people flew in Friday morning, whatever it was. That Saturday was when I was getting the calls. And then that Sunday, I had already filed the class action lawsuit. And then about 7 days later, we filed an amended lawsuit, which added the allegation that the conduct was criminal. And then 3 months later, the FBI got involved.
So you were getting phone calls from people while they were still on the island?
Yeah, from them, from family members who were here, combination of it. And then people were direct messaging us on Twitter.
Wow. And so it was about 7 days later that you guys filed an amendment that basically said that it was not incompetence, but sort of intended malice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difference between kind of a mere negligence, failure to exercise reasonable care, versus an intent to commit criminal conduct and a financial fraud itself. And so by 7 days later, we had gathered the evidence that it fell into the second category of a financial fraud.
Now, you said that this guy is currently serving time. Is he serving time for this case or for something else?
He's serving time on the pled relating to the investment fraud, I think the plea was to wire fraud. In my mind, it's all interrelated. This is a civil case that I filed, so the civil case has no criminal implications on it.
Gotcha.
Other than to trigger an investigation, which it did, which led to criminal charges. The wire fraud is a related claim because it's all circular. I mean, when it's a Ponzi scheme, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're taking money from some people and then lying to other people to fund the fraud. And so the actual criminal charges, though, are, I think, related to kind of the way the investment vehicles were kind of fraudulently sold as and the way money was taken from investors.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on from that. I know you're busy, and I don't want you to miss too many more phone calls. But real quick, have you had a chance to visit Atlanta and see some of the murals of Colin, Mr. Kaepernick?
I've seen the photos of them, and it looks great. I was disturbed to learn I think it was on the eve of the Super Bowl, that one of the main ones had been destroyed. But then, I think the proper response was more went up. And
yeah,
so
I think that 7 more went
Atlanta.
up as a result, I think.
And look, there's no doubt in my mind that one day, you're going to have avenues and boulevards and schools and universities and clinics and, named after him, because we'll look back at this time and this age and this era of where we all stood as Americans. And regardless of what your political beliefs are or where they rest, whether you're liberal, conservative, whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, the freedom of speech is just so ultimately significant. Its fight for it is so important. And it's not a foregone conclusion that in any era you're going to have somebody who stands up for civil rights and is willing to sacrifice so much.
Well, arguably it is the most American of our rights.
I would agree, and I think that a lot of the other rights all flow from that. I'm with you.
Now, I don't want to talk too much about it because it makes my stomach hurt, and everybody can just go look it up. But are you involved, or were you involved in the Daniel Shaver Mesa, Arizona case?
Yes, I am. And so I represent his widow, Lainey, and their 2 children. Obviously, there was a criminal case where the individual who was involved in the shooting was found to be not guilty by the jury. But, that doesn't resolve the civil case, where I'm the lawyer in the civil case. And so the civil case is a federal civil rights lawsuit against the police department, against Officer Brailsford, against the other sergeants and officers who were there. In the criminal case, when the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt and not negligence in the civil sense, and the ability to basically frame any issue as I acted as I was trained, while that may be a defense in a criminal case, it's not a defense in a civil case. And so the civil case focuses on the policies and practices and procedures that led to that, because at the end of the day, especially when you watch that horrible video, or don't watch the video, but something I think that is, while it's horrible to watch, is something that at least lets you know that there's a lot we have to do to improve officer training. When they go in with that SWAT team in a state where you have the right to carry, in public, and, Daniel Shaver was unarmed, clearly unarmed, and you have this sergeant screaming at him and humiliating him on the floor as his both hands are up and is clearly not posing a threat. And they basically, dehumanize him to the point where he has to crawl, and he's so scared of crawling to the officers because they're screaming at him like the most, unbelievable type of hazing you could ever have, which is so unnecessary. And when he loses his balance, that they shot and killed him and executed him. So that case goes on. I think the sergeant who was giving the orders moved to the Philippines or Thailand. I forget which one, but he swiftly moved out of America. And the other officer, Brailsford, who was involved in the shooting, I think he declared bankruptcy, which has stalled the case temporarily. And so when you declare bankruptcy, it has a limited effect on a stay while you sort out the impact of a bankruptcy filing. And so the wheels of justice move sometimes quicker in other cases than others. And here, it's moving at its frustratingly slow pace, but it'll move towards justice.
Well, thank you for that. And like I said, everybody should really just look into that case. I think that Ben said he gave enough details so that you kind of know what it's about, but it's not covered very well by the media. And I haven't seen the video, but I've heard the audio of the video, and it makes my stomach hurt. So that's why I don't want to talk about it. So guys, feel free to look that up on your own time, but don't do it at work, and don't do it on a full stomach. So another time that our interview got rescheduled, a few minutes after I found out it was rescheduled, I saw in the media or in the news that your firm is involved with the Jussie Smollett case. Are you involved in that at all?
So the short answer is that to a limited degree, I help out our firm in virtually everything that our firm does. we're a true team in every case, whether it's this case or any other case. So, there's no propriety of this is my case or this is your case per se. But obviously, it's outside of my specialty area as the matter has become a criminal investigation, and so not really within my area. My specialty is I do the civil litigation at the firm and the class actions, and this doesn't fall into that category. But I say that in true Geragos fashion, that I'm always ready and willing to help, Mark and his team on anything that they may or may not have. But I would just say this, given that it's a criminal investigation, I would, for at least my ability to speak on anything, leave it at that, which is, the presumption of innocence is a firmly rooted concept that we shouldn't forget and that our country values. I think a lot of the coverage has been just utterly absurd, just as a passive observer in terms of the values of our country. And, I think that the criminal justice system will play out and we'll see what happens.
Judging, just me looking, from the far outside, I don't have anything to do with the law. It seems that the court of public opinion, much in the way that Michael Jackson was immediately assumed guilty everywhere, I feel like that's kind of what's going on with not just Jussie, but kind of with every news story that hits the TV or the media nowadays. It's instantly, the public perception is either they did it or they didn't, and they don't even wait for a trial or any of that. They just automatically assume and then kind of stick with that for, eternity. I mean, Michael Jackson was never found guilty in a court of law, but it's just like common knowledge that he's guilty, but he never was, as far as I know.
Well, and that predates, the internet era. We're not even on a 24-hour news cycle anymore. I mean, I think we're on a 30-minute news cycle or even a 15-minute news cycle, or with Twitter, a Twitter news cycle where a new tweet changes the narrative. And as people look for instant gratification or instant whatever, there's a desire to complete the full cycle of a story one way or the other in a day or less than a day. And that leads to, broadly in all cases, a rush to judgment. There's no real nuance, high-level, sophisticated communication that's really going on. And I get that the format of shows, doesn't necessarily lend itself to nuance and that level and layer of or type of communication. And it's very possible that the studies and the research and the data show that consumers don't want that communication, when they come home from a long day of work to have to hear long, sophisticated debates. But I like to view my role within Mark's firm and within the legal community in general, as I hope how people who I've dealt with or worked with perceive or believe me to be, is fair, keeping an open mind, and to really talk through issues on a detailed level, not to just accept things at face value, and to really have detailed, intimate, sophisticated discussions on issues, and to not be so wedded to a particular viewpoint that I'm not willing to listen to others. And I think that probably served me best being a lawyer and doing the kind of, high profile, intense litigations that I do, is to hopefully bring a sense of, they joke on the Corolla show and they call me Boring Cop or Mr. Wednesday. And the joke is that the guy who goes out on Friday or Saturday, and Mr. Wednesday is the boring guy, we're Boring Cop, and there's a good cop and bad cop and then Boring Cop, and I'm Boring Cop. But everyone needs one, I'm not that boring. But two, everyone needs a boring cop in their life, to the extent the boring cop means that there's deliberation, a testing and challenging of ideas, a rigorous analysis of data, and following the truth wherever it leads. And I'll leave your listeners with that.
Nice. One last question before you go, if you can. Can you tell us what is Big Three and what's your involvement in it?
See, that's the perfect last question, too, because that's a question that I'd love to answer. So the Big Three basketball league is a 3-on-3 league that was founded by Ice Cube and Jeff Quatnett. Our commissioner is Clyde the Glide Drexler.
What?
And so we started in 2017. In this day and age, since the UFC, there's really been no new sports league that, has sustained multiple seasons and become a success. But the Big Three has been just that. It's been a smashing, superb success. In the first game, in Brooklyn, basically sold out the stadium with I think it was 15,000 or 16,000 people showed up to the first game in 2017. And our 3-on-3 basketball games take place in the summer, starts late June. It's players who formerly played in the NBA or maybe looking to get back into the NBA, but big, names that everyone would know of, from Amari Stoudemire to Birdman to Big Baby Glenn Davis and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. It's high level, it's full contact, it's old school meets new school basketball, and the 3-on-3 format and the rules that Ice Cube and Jeff Quatnitz created have been so successful in creating a real professional game. And our first season was a smash hit. Our second season, last summer, was also a smash hit, averaging about 13,000, 14,000 people per game, at real raucous, exciting crowds that look like NBA playoff games, watching these 3-on-3 games. And so I'm a lawyer for the league. My role is also to be an executive to help out in the operations of the league. And it's really just a passion of mine, to, again, get to work with inspiring people like Ice Cube and Jeff and Clyde and Mark and Amy Trask, who's the chairman of the board. It's a model of successful corporate governance and diversity, on our board and in the league itself. And to me, it continues, and it's a natural extension of the work that I do, litigation and in the law, because the big three is all about player empowerment and restoring kind of a different balance of power towards the players and how athletics are viewed. It's about giving players an avenue to be creative and to have their kids watch them play at a high level. Once their kids are kind of grown up, usually when the players start off, the kids are babies. They don't get to remember their dads playing in the NBA. And so now when they're 12, 13, 14, they can see their dads play competitive professional basketball in the big three. And of course, we look forward to expanding the league internationally and continuing its growth.
Well, that sounds amazing, and I hope y'all come to San Antonio sometime soon. Now, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
No, I just want to thank you for conducting the interview. Sorry we had to reschedule and play musical scheduling chair so many times. And always happy to, if you or your listeners have any, questions, legal questions that I can be helpful to, I'm always happy to help out, where I can and if I can. With that, I'll leave that asterisk there. So thank you so much for having me on.
That being said, Ben, tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and then I'll let you have the rest of your day back.
Great. You can find me on Twitter. It's Meiselas, B, Meiselasb as in boy, at Meiselasb. And then you can always just shoot me an email, which is on my Twitter, but it's Ben, B-E-N, at Geragos.com, Geragos, Ben at Geragos.com.
Ben Meiselas, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today and let us get to know you a little bit better. And again, thank you for being patient and not giving up on me so that we could get this turkey stuffed.
Get the turkey stuffed and never give up. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. You have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Dick.
Bye. Hey guys, this is Steve Owens from Fascination Street Podcast here with a very important message. I'm awesome. I bet you thought I was going to say something else, but nope. What's important here is that I am awesome. I started this show because I truly believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear those stories. In the short time I've been doing this show, I've interviewed actors, directors, writers, inventors, podcasters, musicians, pro athletes, Olympic athletes, actual war heroes, even a Bond girl and a luthier, whatever the hell that is, and of course, regular people. From people who wanted to be stars but never gave it a real try, to big company CEOs and people who got to meet their favorite president. I love getting to meet and speak with people who have a story to tell. I feel like everyone does, and it's my job to get them to tell it. You never know who my next guest will be. An Academy Award-winning actor, a platinum-selling musician, or your own mother-in-law. But one thing is for certain, you will be fascinated by their story. So come take a walk with me down Fascination Street. You can find Fascination Street Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, And of course, FascinationStreetPod.com. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.